Hello and welcome back to the third and final video in the 503 series where we look at doing tasks 2 and 3. My name is Brent Warren, and I'm the training director and one of the tutors at CMBD. Now, the first thing that causes an initial confusion is that the running order in the assignment brief differs from that in the syllabus or unit specification. Task 1 was nice and easy, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 were the first ACs in each of the two documents. In Task 2 in the assignment brief, the ACs are 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3. So you just need to make sure you're looking at the right indicative content in the syllabus. This is something that crops up quite a lot in CMI assignments all over the place. I've no idea why, but the order that we need to follow is that of the assignment brief. So, having sorted that out, let's look at the word count. We've got 1,500 words in total for task 2, and we've got 3 ACs within that task. So we've got another 500 word per topic guideline. We're being asked to write an account on techniques for managing and leading individuals and teams to achieve success. And we've also got a couple of new command definition verbs. We've got a couple of examines and a develop. So we'll have a look at those in a little bit more detail with each of the ACs. The other sort of general instructions when I look at the assignment brief are to use the scenario if you need to have headings and subheadings. Another one where you can choose to include diagrams and tables to save word count. And also the usual, your discussion should be underpinned with relevant theoretical principles, etc. So let's take a look at the command verb examine. And if I refer to my notes here, inspect something thoroughly in order to determine its nature or condition. So when we look at methods of monitoring and managing individual and team performance, how fit for purpose is the method we've chosen, what sort of information does it tell us, how can we use it, etc. Very specifically, you're asked for 2 methods, and you're also asked to distinguish between monitoring individuals and monitoring the team as a whole. If you go to the indicative content in the syllabus, you've got a whole raft of thought provokers and areas that you could choose to use in your assignment. 3.2 follows a very similar format. If we look at the actual question, it's to develop approaches to respond to 3 challenges of managing and leading multidisciplinary and remote teams. Once again, in the indicative content, we've got a whole number of potential challenges. It's interesting to me that they've got 2 types of team in the AC. They've got multidisciplinary and they've got remote teams. Chop it up whichever way suits your personal experiences and organisation. You might choose to sort of aim a couple of them at multidisciplinary and one at a remote team, or vice versa. But tailor the answer to suit your own circumstances and your own examples. As with all the ACs, you're going to need a couple of models and examples, and the only one actually mentioned in the indicative content is Lencioni. But you could also use Tuckman's forming, storming, norming and performing model. Jancis did some good stuff on groupthink. There's loads of stuff in Management Direct. You don't have to just stick to the one that they're recommending. Just a quick note on the command verb develop. Elaborate, expand or progress an idea from a starting point, building upon given information. So you might take that Tuckman model, the forming, storming, etc. You might talk about the model as a concept, then talk about perhaps where your own team is at the moment, and maybe how you managed it to get it through the storming phase or whatever. So take the concept and develop it through to kind of implementation. Having mentioned Tuckman a couple of times now, I just want to say that that is not a specific recommendation to use it. I've just simply used it as an example of how to break that model down. So let's move on to the final task in the assignment brief, which you'll note they've split into 3A and 3B. Quick glance at the word count tells us we've got 500 words for each, so nothing different there. That's the same as for all the previous ACs. The kind of overall instruction for 3A is to write an account and discuss 2 techniques used for assessing current and future team capabilities and requirements. So note the current and looking into the future. That needs to come out in the answer. Another one where headings and subheadings are required. Another one where you might be able to save word count with some suitable tables and diagrams, and the usual underpin with relevant theoretical principles and models. It doesn't actually specify anywhere how many references you need for each of these ACs, but I think as a rule of thumb, 2/3 maybe is more than sufficient. Okay, so now we're in a position to move on to the final AC in the assignment, which is 2.2. Now, up to this point for each AC, it's been pretty similar, but there are a couple of subtle differences about 2.2 that I just want to point out. The first of these is that if you have been using the Scenario A approach, they're asking you to change scenarios, and there's another one that more readily suits this AC on learning and development. However, most of you are probably using your own organisation or organisations that you are familiar with, so you can ignore that and move on. The other subtle change is that when we look at the instruction under the write a report bit, it says the report must assess the factors, which is in bold type, which impact on the selection of learning and development activities, also in bold type. And the reason for that is when we go to the indicative content, we can see that we've actually got separate suggestions for the factors and for the learning and development activities. So you need to have a look at those as thought provokers and get both of them in. The other thing just to take note of on the assignment brief, in that guidance for completion of task 3B, it says your discussion must consider learning and development activities for both individuals and teams. It's quite common for me to get assignments where one of those has been missed out, so just pick up on that point. The only other comment I've got about 2.2 is the command verb. The command verb is assess, provide a reason, judgment or rationale of the standard quality value or importance of something informed by relevant facts / rationale. Now, the last thing I just want to cover in this last tutorial is the evidence booklet. You might recall from earlier that this is where we can put supporting documents and charts and stuff that will help us with our answers in the assignment brief. The assignment does lend itself to being supported by evidence in certain places. I mean, you might have training matrix grids, or you might have examples of personal development documents and things like that. It also contains a declaration that you have to sign that the work is your own, that you've not copied stuff or borrowed stuff from anybody else, and that you've identified the sources and the authors of the work that you've used. The instructions for how specifically to use the evidence booklet are on the front of the assignment itself. There's some stuff there about how many pages long a piece of evidence can be, and also about embedding files. Just a note on embedding files, check with us first before you do it, because it can cause some issues. If you look inside the evidence booklet, you've got 3 sections. You've got learner evidence, you've got bibliography, and you've got work-based evidence. The work-based evidence bit is where you post your supporting documents. And if you posted a document in there in the learner evidence bit, you need to write a paragraph, a couple of 100 words about why you've used it, why you've put it in, and how it supports your answer. And also in the assignment brief, make sure that you've cross-referenced, so you're referring to, item number 1 or item number 2 in the evidence booklet, etc. The bibliography section in the evidence book relates to the items that you've used in that. At the end of your assignment brief, you will put the bibliography for your references and sources in there. And that's it. That's the end of this series of video tutorials on 503. I hope that you have found it useful, and once again, thank you for listening.